Welcome back once again. My name is Vibhu and I'm the Director of Certification in Universal Fitness Training Academy. And as usual, I have come up with a new topic. And today's topic is about the bioenergetics of exercise and training. So, what is basically bioenergetics? Bio means biology, biological energy. We produce energy on day-to-day basis every time, and during the whole 24 hours a day, while sleeping, while sitting, while doing our day-to-day physical activity, exercise, even while thinking, we produce energy. So, what is that biological energy is all about? We will discuss today. So, let us see. In biology, the three basic energy systems exist in muscle cells of any mammalian animals. So, in mammals means like who give birth to their children, and those who feed their children with milk. They have got breast tissue. So mammals are those animals which has got breast tissue. And basically the main energy currency in our body is ATP, which is basically called the adenosine triphosphate. This ATP. So the body mainly consists of three types of energy systems, and one is the phosphagen system, which is in simple terms also called the immediate energy system. And whenever we need energy immediately, depending on irrespective of intensity of activity. Suppose when we wake up early in the morning, for the first 5-6 seconds, we need immediate energy. So that immediate energy is being produced by the phosphagen system, and while doing activity, physical activity, workout, exercise, the first initial few seconds is basically that kind of instant energy is being provided by the phosphagen system. That's why it's also called the immediate energy system. And second is the glycolysis system or the short-term energy system. Once you surpass 6 seconds, then the glycolysis system comes into play. Glycolysis is basically converting of carbohydrate into glucose to generate ATP. And lastly is the oxidative system, means long-term energy system. So long-term energy system means you are doing the activity and continuing the activity, and for minutes, for hours, and for many hours. So at that point of time, the oxidative system comes into play. So means the body starts consuming oxygen. So out of these three systems, the top 1 and 2 are basically anaerobic energy system. Anaerobic energy system means it refers to those microorganisms who basically don't need any kind of oxygen to produce energy. So for example, like if you are doing weight training, if you are doing 100-meter dash or sprinting, and those kind of activities, short-term intense activities, basically are anaerobic activities where we don't need oxygen to produce energy in our body. And oxidative system is basically also called the aerobic energy system, where we need oxygen in order to produce ATP in our body. So finally, the main thing is that ATP has to be produced either this way or the other way. ATP is the only energy producing molecule in our body. Sometimes the body uses the phosphagen system, sometimes the body uses the glycolysis system, or the oxidative system, depending on intensity and depending on the type of work or physical activity you are doing. So this is basically the structure of adenosine triphosphate molecule. Here you can see adenosine means adenine is basically a nitrogen base, and ribose is basically a 5-carbon sugar, and triphosphate is basically like 3 phosphate molecules. So adenosine triphosphate is classified as a high energy molecule, which is present in the muscle cell, and it stores large amount of energy in chemical bonds of the two phosphate terminal groups. And because the muscle cells store ATP in limited amounts, and any kind of physical activity requires a constant supply of ATP, and without ATP we cannot do any kind of activity. I will give you an example. When a person dies or any animal dies, you might have seen that the particular body becomes stiff. So that is basically called rigor mortis. When our body stops producing ATP, our muscles cannot contract. So finally, when there is no energy in the muscles, so the body becomes stiff and cold. And this is another structure of ATP molecule showing the high energy phosphate bonds. When the third ATP molecule is separated from the adenosine by the action of the ATP's energy is released. So here you can see this is adenine, this is ribose, and you can see that how energy is being released. As soon as the third the third phosphate molecule is being detached from the adenosine, free energy is released. So this is how the body produces energy. See, ultimately, either you use any kind of physical activity, whatever physical activity you are doing, you have to produce ATP in your body, in your muscle cells. Otherwise, we cannot move because ATP is being produced 24 hours a day until and unless we go to the grave. This is the whole muscle structure, and it has got different sections. The smallest unit of contractile muscle fibers, actin and myosin. This is the smallest unit of muscle fiber, and that it's microscopic. Basically, it's fine. It's finer than a hair strand. So in that microscopic muscle fiber, there are certain spaces, and between those muscle fibrils, the sarcoplasm is exist. So the sarcoplasm, in that sarcoplasm, basically ATP is being generated, and it is basically the liquid part of the muscle cell where all those glycogen, protein, ATP is being generated. So this is basically, it happens inside the muscle cell, and the phosphagen system, out of this 3 macronutrients. See, while producing energy, we need food also, right? So we need food as fuel to generate energy in our body. So out of the 3 macronutrients, protein, fats, and carbohydrates, as we know that out of these 3 macronutrients, the main source of energy is carbohydrate, because carbohydrate is basically like it's easy to convert into glucose, and carbohydrate, as you know, that the structure of carbohydrate is like that it can be easily converted into energy. That's why it's an advice to you, all personal trainers, all gym trainers, all fitness enthusiasts, do not have any kind of protein source or fats or something like that before workout, because you need to have carbohydrate. And beware of those trainers who advise you on taking protein shakes and who advise you on taking taking amino acids before workout, because honestly speaking, weight training is an anaerobic activity, and our body has to produce, our body produces ATP without the presence of oxygen, and you really need only carbohydrate. Only carbohydrate is enough before pre-workout. Do not get confused. Do not have protein before workout, because protein and fats are not a good source of energy, direct energy source. So the only energy source which is carbohydrate, and which is really needed before doing any kind of anaerobic activity. So anyway, we are learning about the anaerobic energy system, and carbohydrate is the main energy source. So before workout, you just have to have carbohydrate, no other macronutrient source. If you have macronutrient source, and even I have seen seen some bodybuilders and gym trainers advising their clients to have protein. So they keep on telling their clients that while doing weight training, you will be damaging your muscles. So if you have protein will go inside the muscle cells, immediately the muscle will start building up. So on that also I will have a different topic. I'll make a different video on that, about protein synthesis. And so anyway, let's come back to the topic. So, and this is the phosphagen system. This is like equation. Here you can see that basically the phosphagen system relies on, depends on hydrolysis. Hydrolysis is basically what? Breakdown of ATP. The breakdown of ATP molecule along with one molecule of water. So that is basically called hydrolysis, and that enzymatic process is basically being stimulated or catalyzed by the enzyme called creatine kinase. So here you can see the rate of ATP production and synthesis basically is done by the creatine kinase, and creatine kinase is an enzyme which after you use ATP as a source of energy, it converts into ADP. Then again that ADP binds with the available creatine phosphate in our muscle cells, and along with that phosphate group, it combines and again it generates ATP. So that enzymatic activity is being catalyzed by creatine kinase. So this is how the ATP is being regenerated again and again. But it depends on the type of intensity of exercise. If you are training too hard, say if you are doing 1 or 2 repetitions, you need to at least rest for at least a minimum of 7. We also have to see that the kind of muscle fibers which we are using while utilizing the phosphagen system, because the phosphagen system basically uses the anaerobic energy system, and at the same time we need to understand that our exercise has to be intense enough so that we are stimulating the phosphagen system. And the muscle fibers which are basically the muscle fibers which can basically capitalize on the phosphagen system is the type 2X muscle fibers, or we call the type 2 muscle fibers, because they have powerful muscle fibers, and they have higher storage of phosphagen, and they have higher storage of creatine. And at the same time, I would also like to tell you that those individuals who have got higher amount of type 2X muscle fibers or type 2 muscle fibers can generate ATP frequently. So you need to understand also that the intensity of exercise is really matters a lot while utilizing the phosphagen system. And benefits related to health and fitness. Basically, when you are doing weight training, the kind of benefits while using the phosphagen system is like you will be more powerful, you will be able to generate more and more energy while working out. And at the same time, regarding the calorie burning issue, like the calories which you will be able to if you are targeting for fat loss, so then it becomes a very different issue, because the phosphagen, if you train the phosphagen system, you will not be able to burn that much calories. Yeah, but to certain extent, you will be able to build a lot of a lot of muscles, and which can help to increase your metabolic rate to some extent. And ATP stores, as I already informed, that ATP stores are basically like more in type 2X muscle fibers. So people with more of type 2X muscle fibers have more of ATP. And there is another mechanism through which the body generates ATP, and that is the 2-ADP. Means there is basically also known as the biogenesis reaction, and the biogenesis reaction is being triggered by adenylate kinase, and which helps to bind 2-ADP with adenosine monophosphate, and it helps to generate ADP. And the glycolysis, the second system mechanism is the glycolysis. This is also another part of the anaerobic mechanism, and the glycolysis system is basically also known as the short-term energy system. So anaerobic mechanism in the cytoplasm of a muscle cell means the glycolysis also produces ATP, and that ATP is basically generated in the cytoplasm of the muscle cell. And out of these three macronutrients, same like phosphagen, it utilizes more of carbohydrate. Duration and intensity and choice of event is like you need to train more than moderately high, say for example more than 4 or 5 repetitions or 10-12 repetitions, like that. And the choice of event of physical activity means has to be more than moderate. And muscle fibers, basically you can use type 2A muscle fibers, and or intermediate muscle fibers you can use. And the exercise nature has to be of moderately high intensity, and the rate of ATP production is a little bit slow, but far more than the phosphagen system, because the intensity is a little bit less. And here you can see that during glycolysis, mainly the end product is pyruvate, and the pyruvate is basically the end product of glycolysis. After carbohydrates is broken down into glucose, they convert into pyruvate. So there is a mechanism which is basically called the fast glycolysis or the anaerobic glycolysis. So there's a trick in this. The pyruvate, which is the end product of glycolysis of carbohydrate metabolism, can also convert into lactate. And when it's converted into lactate, if the intensity is say suppose 70 or 80%, or not below 60%, then those pyruvate converts into lactate, and then goes into the cytoplasm. So they are basically the ATP is being generated in the cytoplasm. And if the intensity is too, let's say below 60%, then the pyruvate, instead of converting into lactate, it converts, it settles into the mitochondria and undergo Krebs cycle. So that is basically called the slow glycolysis or the aerobic glycolysis. Means that is basically the transition period. Means the more if the intensity is 100%, 80 to 100%, you are using mostly 100% you are using the phosphagen system. Within the range of 80 to 100%, you are using the glycolysis system, and in that glycolysis system you will be stimulating more of the fast glycolysis. And if the intensity is a little bit less, you will be your transition will be towards the slow glycolysis process. Means the body is transiting towards the aerobic energy system. And And this is, you can see that this is the mitochondria where where the pyruvate, if the intensity is too less, then the pyruvate, instead of converting into lactate, it converts into it settles into the mitochondria. The relationship of intensity and glycolysis. I already mentioned that the intensity and the relationship of glycolysis is like, the body starts, the body generally produces energy to various steps, and the more the intensity goes up, the more the body is going to produce lactate, and instead of lactate, if the intensity is too less, then it starts. The resynthesis of basically ATP is done through a process called phosphorylation, and it is the process of adding an inorganic phosphate to another molecule. It's a direct conversion of ADP along with phosphate and converts into ATP. This is a direct conversion of ADP combining with phosphate group and converts into ATP. So in glycolysis, the substrate level phosphorylation is basically, it refers to the direct resynthesis of ATP from ADP. And during a single reaction in metabolic, what is to illustrate in glycolysis, there are two steps that result in substrate level phosphorylation of ATP to ADP. And oxidative phosphorylation means like, the resynthesis of ATP in the final system is the oxidative system. The oxidative system also, as I mentioned, that is the long-term energy system, means the body uses oxygen to, generate ATP. So at rest, approximately 70% of ATP is being produced and derived from fats and 30% from carbohydrates. And that is like, at rest means like, you are sleeping and you are not doing any activity, but the body will still producing, ATP, but 70% is from carbohydrates, 30% is from fats. And during low intensity activities, uses primarily carbohydrates and fats as substrates. As you start doing activity, your day-to-day activity, it's almost, carbohydrates and fats are being burned almost similarly, roughly 5 or 10% here and there, and it depends on, it varies from person to person. And because, because of the fat percentage, because of genes, because of the particular amount of muscle mass in that individual, gender, race, and a lot of other variables, experience, a lot of other things, experience, sports, physical activity. But as a whole, carbohydrates and fats are quite burned equally. And protein does not provide a significant contribution for providing ATP. Yes, protein can be utilized as a source of energy only if your exercise intensity is more than, if your exercise intensity is low and you are, exceeding your exercise duration beyond 90 minutes, then it might happen that the body starts using protein as a source of energy, and which can cause obviously cause muscle loss. That's why long distance running is not a good fat burning activity, is basically because if you keep on doing too much of ultra marathon runs and long distance running, you will lose muscle. So you need to figure that out. Long distance running is not a good idea for losing fat, for targeting fat loss. You lose muscle, and mostly while using protein, it has been shown in research studies that mostly the branching amino acids are basically being catabolized, and some other amino acids too. And oxidative system, as the intensity increases, the fuel substrate again moves towards carbohydrate sources. See, the thing is that if you are doing intense activity, you are putting 100% effort, you will be using Phosphagen system. As the intensity goes down a little bit, say by 10 or 15%, you'll be using the fast glycolysis system, and that ATP will be produced in the cytoplasm of the muscle cell. And again, if the intensity is a little bit lesser, say beyond 80%, 70, or beyond less than 70%, the body will again go to the slow glycolysis mode, and that time, instead of the glycolysis, during the glycolysis process, instead of the carbohydrate, instead of turning into glucose, and after that glucose is basically being turned into pyruvate, and instead of that pyruvate turning into lactate, it will settle into the mitochondria because the intensity of workout has been reduced. And special note, however, during prolonged sub-maximal steady state work, there is a gradual switch from carbohydrate back to fats. Means if you keep on continuing the activity, again the body will get tired, the movement will be slow and intense. Again, the body will turn back to carbohydrates as a source of energy. So it's a cycle. It's a cyclical process. And there are a few other examples, like if you are doing light weight training, if you are using the tempo. Suppose for example, if you are doing squats of 50 kilos, and as soon as slowly you will be getting tired. Though first you will start doing a lot of repetitions, and after 50 or 60, when you will be really really tired, then the body will be forced to use the type 2X muscle fibers, means the larger muscle fibers. So automatically, the body will switch over to carbohydrates. So that's just like that. The energy keeps on, building up, and again, if the intensity is low, again, we will switch from carbohydrates to fats to protein. So it keeps on moving. Glucose and glycogen oxidation. The oxidative metabolism of glucose, glycogen begins with glycolysis. The oxygen is present in sufficient quantities. The end product of glycolysis is pyruvate. It's not converted to lactate, but is transported into the mitochondria, where it is converted to acetyl CoA, means 2-carbon molecule, which enters the Krebs cycle and also known as the citric acid cycle. You might have heard about the citric acid cycle, which is basically the beginning of the oxidative system. And at resynthesis, the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle is basically a series of action, and basically it continues the oxidation of substrate from from glycolysis and produces 2 ATP indirect-default guanine triphosphate and GTP via substrate level phosphorylation for each molecule of glucose. Oxidative phosphorylation. Oxidative phosphorylation refers to the resynthesis of ATP in the electron transport chain. So basically, the oxidative system is a very complex mechanism, and I have tried to simplify it as much as possible. And special note, however, during some maximal steady state work, again, the greatest shift will be to different the different energy substrates. So that's it, guys. Like, the main reason for making this video is to make you understand that while training, you should be aware that what kind of energy system you are utilizing and what kind of energy source you want to target, and at the same time you also can figure out whether you are burning carbs, whether you are burning fats, whether you are burning protein. Because I've seen that a lot of people doing more than 1 hour, 1.5 hour, 2 hours of exercise. So if you are targeting fat loss, do not go for that. Your workout should be short and intense, and not more than 60 minutes, because you will burn muscle. Like the body will start using muscles as a source of energy. So our job is to do intense exercises, moderate duration. Said the exercise intensity should not cross beyond 60 minutes. Otherwise, the body will switch over from carbohydrates to protein sources, and you don't want that. I know that. So, and at the same time, you also have to be aware that what kind of muscle fibers you are using. And if you are using, say, suppose if you want to hit the Phosphagen system, you have to do more of heavy exercises, hitting the type 2X muscle fibers. If you want to hit the intermittent muscle fibers, for conditioning and for short distance, middle distance, for football, boxing, then you are hitting the glycolysis system. And if you want to go for marathon, then your intensity has to be a little bit less, means 50 to 60%. Then you will be hitting the oxidative system. And you have to manipulate your diet at the same time to minimize muscle loss for long distance endurance activity. Thanks anyway. If you like the video, you can press the like button and share with your friends. And till then, keep watching. I'll be coming up with more videos. Till then, stay fit, stay strong and healthy. Thank you.